Today, we'll do the Pokemon Roulette Challenge. Here are the rules. After every major fight, you release or put a Pokemon that was in your team into the box for the rest of the run, or you can just release it. For the random chance of who gets released, I used a random number generator. The Pokemon's entire evolutionary line is banned for the rest of the run, so no replacements. As to what counts as a major fight, I chose the rival fights against May, Brandon, and Wally. The gym fights, which are Roxanne, Brawly, Watson, Flannery, Norman, Winoria, Liz&Tate, and Juan. And I'm also including every battle against Maxie and Archie. The version I used was Pokemon Emerald for the Game Boy. Here are some additional rules that I used. Set mode, which means that instead of the game asking me if I want to switch once the opposing trainer's Pokemon faints, it just continues. Maximum of 3 extra Pokemon in the box, and have the same amount of Pokemon as the next gym leader. After the 8th gym leader, you're free to use a full team. Or I'm free to use a full team. Side note, I allowed myself to use healing items and legendaries. I'll put timestamps of when Run 1 begins and ends, Run 2's beginning and ending, and my ending thoughts about this challenge. Here's a list of the major fights and the timestamps. With that said, let's begin Run 1.
To begin, we begin our options of Trico, Torchic, and Mudkip. I picked Trico and named him Monty. After we help Professor Birch, we go to our first rival fight on Route 103. Since I won the fight, as in the rules, that means I have to roulette afterwards. Given how I only have Monty, that means Monty goes to the box. However, I do have to catch a replacement before I can actually put Monty in the box permanently. I found a Wurmple which I caught and named Fang. Now let's go to the box where Monty can eternally rest.
Goodbye. Now we move forward with Fang by our side. I captured Poochyena on Route 102 and named her Celis. Also, I found a Ralts and named him Brainiac. I grind and fight throughout 102, and eventually I visit Norman at the gym and meet Wally. Some fighting later, and Fang evolves into Silcoon at Route 104. We head to Petalburg Woods, and I fight the first Aqua Grunt to protect the scientists working for Devin Goods. Afterwards, I catch a Meryl on Route 104, and I name him Krillin. Also, Fang evolves into a butterfly. Now, on to our first gym battle against Roxanne, the Rock-type specialist. I haven't played Emerald in a long time, so I carelessly overestimated Fang's abilities and not level up a perfectly good Meryl. As you can see, my team was underleveled as a result, and I didn't utilize Krillin, a water type. Her Geodude used Rock Throw, Defense Curl, and Rock Tomb. And that was my first wipe. So to fix my mistake, I grinded all 3 until level 15, the same level as her Nosepass. While grinding, I catch a Talo on Route 116 and name him Talon. As for round 2, I had Krillin use Water Gun, which was a move learned at level 10, and spammed it. I get the badge shortly after. Now I use the random number generator, and it got 2. And given how Celis was in the second spot, that means that she gets to join Monty in the farewell box. I'm sure Celis would have been a great Pokemon to use in the late game, but the roulette said otherwise. I spotted May and picked no out of curiosity, and it turns out she doesn't battle you if you say no. I wish other trainers would do that. After rescuing Kiko the Wingull from the Aqua Grunt, we progress to Dewford Town. We make quick work of the gym trainers, and we go on to our second gym battle against Brawly the fighting type specialist. I used Talon. The only strategy I used besides spam wing attack was use focus energy while Brawly heal his meditate. After a few more wing attacks, I got the second badge. As for the roulette, Krillin was the unlucky one. His water typing and water moves would have been useful against Flannery, but at least I was able to use them against Roxanne. Since the gym has 4 Pokemon, that means we can now have 4 Pokemon in our team as well now. Afterwards, we go to Granite Cave and find Steven. We deliver the mail to Steven, and I go back to Rustboro to receive the item called EXP Share from the President. I captured a Magikarp named Jackie Can. Afterwards, we go to Slateport and do more of the story. And eventually, we fight May, which is an incredibly tough fight, but we won thanks to Talon, who was paralyzed prior, and Fang. Talon having paralysis helps play into its guts, which raises its attack. As for how much attack, it's an additional 50%. Maximum combustion is very strong, almost taking my entire team. However, Fang's gust attack takes him down. As for who gets picked for the roulette, it's Brainiac, which is unfortunate, but I didn't feel too bad about losing him. Afterwards, I caught an Electric named Spar. Later, I catch an Oddish and name her Tina. I fight Wally, who's blocking the entrance to Watson's gym. Spar goes down, but Talon makes quick work of his rolls. Given how he only has the rolls, it's a quick match. Since Wally is a major fight, after winning I go to the box for another roulette. This time around I lose Talon. I feel Talon was going to be a very valuable asset in the late game, but this is fine. Tina evolves into Gloom. Jackie Can evolves into Gyarados. Finally, we face Watson. I think Tina handles the Voltorb and Electric well. The Sleep Powder, Poison Powder, and Absorb does the trick. The main issue was the Magneton. The reason being is due to its typing and moveset of Electric and Steel type, and moves such as Sonic Boom, Shockwave, Thunder Wave, and Supersonic. Poison Powder won't work on Steel types, and Absorb only deals about half damage. So it was a learning experience as I got swept by Magneton. I thought about how to work around the Magneton, then I remembered seeing Geodudes and Errands at Granite Cave.
and given how rock types are immune to electricity, I decided to make my way back to Dewford Town and go searching. From there, I caught a Geodude named Nosa and an Aron named Cora. I was surprised to find out electric moves work on it. It turns out it's ground types that are immune to electric moves and not rock. After Cora faints, we use Nosa and spam Magnitude to secure the win. Afterwards, it's time for another roulette. This time we lose Spar. I never used Electric before, so I can't really tell if I lost a good asset or not, but I'm guessing he would have been useful against Juan and Wally at the very least. After some story and grinding, we reach Maxie. I use Jackie Can and make use of his Dragon Rage and Bite. Eventually, I win. I go to the box for another roulette. This time, I lost Jackie Can. Same thoughts as losing Spar. I'm guessing he would have been useful in the late stage of the game, but the roulette said otherwise. Now I'm against Flannery, the Fire-type specialist. I start off with Nosa and use Magnitude several times. This time I have 3 Pokemon and an egg. I have several revival herbs in case of Nosa fainting, and eventually I beat Flannery and it's on to the roulette. Looking back, only having 1 Pokemon with effective typing wasn't a good plan, since I could have ran out of revives or revival herbs, or Flannery's team could have been faster than Nosa. Having Tina use Sleep Powder and being faster does justify having her on the team for the fight at the very least. Finally, she brings out Torkoal, which uses Overheat, and that takes down Nosa. I have Tina use Sleep Powder and then use a Revival Herb on Nosa and use Magnitude once more. With another major fight done, it's on to the roulette. I lost Nosa, which is fine given how I can't evolve her, and she did really well while in the fights I brought her in. Later, I catch a Trapinch and name him Elf. Some training later, and we face off against Norman. I start off with Tina, who damages the Spinda, and then I switch out to Fang, and eventually to Cora. There's not much I can say about the rest of the fight besides that it took a while, when compared to the other major fights. During the slacking section, I think I should have switched to Tina to use Poison Powder, and then back to Cora to speed things up. I think the MVP was Cora for her defense and steel rock typing. We beat Norman. As for the roulette this time, I lost Tina. I wish she stayed longer. I was hoping Fang would have gotten picked, but his luck hasn't run out just yet. I catch a Zubat named Pumpkin, and a Tentacool named Leona. I catch a Voltorb and name it Low. The egg hatches, and it's a Wynot, which I name Riz. I catch a Pelipper and name it Cinch, and later on I wipe to a doubles match. I think the main reason why I lost was because near the end, I had Cinch use Wing Attack on the Absol instead of the Pincer, and because I didn't heal during the fight. Later on, Low evolves into Electrode. After interrupting Team Aqua's plan yet again, we get a cast form and name it Casey. We fight May again. This time we have Low take on her Pelipper, Combustion, and deal a bit of damage against Lombre. Lombre's Swift finishes off Low, so we have Cinch finish the fight with a Wing Attack. With another rival fight done, we go on in Roulette. This time I lose Low to the Roulette. I enjoyed using Low and was sad to see another useful member gone. Before fighting Winoria, I did some more training and I wiped twice while doing so. Coincidentally, both had Minetrix and there were double battles. I'm starting to think Spar might have been quite the carry had he not been taken so early, and if I had the opportunity to train him. Eventually, I take on Winoria, the flying type specialist. Cora makes quick work of Swablu with strength, and then she brings out her Altaria. I had no idea Altaria knew the Earthquake. Before the fight, I thought its moveset was Dragon Dance, Dragon Breath, Brave Bird, and Rest. Turns out the moveset is actually Dragon Dance, Dragon Breath, Aerial Ace, and Earthquake, so I clearly never learned about checking the gym leader's Pokemon and their moveset. Like my first wipe. As Altaria sets up Dragon Dance, I have Casey use Hail and Snow Powder. The Altaria stays frozen and is dealt with. Next up is Skarmory, so I revive Cora and switch. Winoria switches her Skarmory for her Pelipper, so I switch Cora out for Cinch. I skip a few parts of the fight since it takes a while. I do end the battle using Cora against Skarmory. I'm glad Casey's gone, since I'm not sure how useful it would have been for the other major fights. Since the next gym leader is Liz&Tate, that means I can only have 4 Pokemon in the team now. Continuing on with the storyline, we deal with Team Aqua at Mount Pyre, and raiding Magma's hideout. We face off against Maxie, but we wipe at first. Had Leona evolved before the fight, I think it would have been a better fight.
The rematch starts with Yana versus Cora. It takes a while, but Cora wins. Next is Camera Up, so I switch to Cinch and have her use Supersonic. Maxie heals and Camera uses Rock Slide, which takes down Cinch. Now it's Leona's turn. She gets to use Bubble Beam once, then feigns to an Earthquake. I sent out Riz as I revive Leona. Camera misses an Earthquake, which allows Riz to use Destiny Bond. Camera takes down Riz, which also allows itself to take itself down. Next is Crobat versus Leona, but a Wing Attack changes it into Cora versus Crobat. I use a Super Potion and Cora uses Iron Tail, and that finishes the match.
This time I lose Riz. I would have liked to use Riz in more major fights. The Destiny Bond, Mirror Coat, and Counter is really fun once you know which moves to use. Finally, we have one last rival fight against May at Lilycove City. I start off with Cinch, who makes quick work against the Tropius. Then, I switch to Cora against the Pelipper. Cora takes on the Pelipper and fights May's Combustion, which repeatedly uses Bulk Up. But given Cora's defense and typing, the Combustion's Quick Attack and Peck won't be anything to worry about. As for the Ludicolo, I switched back to Cinch and used some wing attacks to secure the win. Now it's on to another roulette. This time it's Cinch. I did feel bad about losing Cinch. He was a valuable asset like in this fight and the other fights. I decided to go to the Safari Zone and see what it had. I caught a Doduo and named her D, a Gearfig named Yaze, and a Pikachu named Ame. I threw Pumpkin out since I went over the backup limit. After handling the Aqua hideout, I make my way towards Moss Deep City and fight the 7th gym leader. I lost the first time, due to Gladol's Earthquake and Natsu's Confuse Ray. As for the second round, I start off with D and Leona. Since Gladol uses Earthquake on Leona, I switch to Alf since he knows Levitate. I have D take down the Natsu and switch Alf back to Leona. Cora's Iron Tail and D's Tri-Attack take down the Lunatone. All that's left is the Solrock and Claydol. I revive Cora, who faints to a Solar Beam, and then revive Leona. Leona lands a Surf and D scores a critical on the Solrock, leaving only the Claydol left. I revive Alf and have D use Fly and Alf use Dragon Breath. On to the roulette. We lose Cora this time. I think Cora was one of the more noticeable ones that helped in the major fights. It's a real shame I couldn't get her to evolve into Aggron. It's only 2 more levels. Next up is a doubles battle where we team up with Steven. I choose Leona, D, and Fang. Leona starts off with Surf that takes down Camerupt. The Mighty Anna uses Swagger on Metang, but gets Metal Clawed in return. Leona surfs again and takes down the other Camerupt. A Metal Claw takes the Golbat down, leaving only the Mighty Anna and Crobat. Crobat's wing attack takes down Leona, so I switch with D. Metang's Metal Claw takes down the Golbat, and D tri-attacks the Crobat. Metang Metal Claws, and that finishes the match. Now it's on to the roulette. This time I lose Leona to the roulette. That's 4 good Pokemon in a row. Even with that, we move on. I fish near Moss Deep City and catch a Wailmer and name her Bow. Later at Seafloor Cavern, we fight Archie for the first and last time. We have Ame against Mighty Anna. She hits Mighty Anna with a Thunderbolt and faints to a takedown, and he gets paralyzed due to Ame's ability, Static. I use Alf next. He uses Dragon Breath as Archie uses the Super Potion. Another Dragon Breath and Crunch takes him down. Next is Crobat, who takes Alf down with a critical Air Cutter. I bring D and have her use Tri-Attack on the Crobat. It lands a burn, which finishes off the Crobat. Archie brings out his Sharpedo, and D uses Tri-Attack and finishes the match. And now it's on to the roulette. I lost Bow to the roulette. It feels like none of my water types can catch a break. After completing the Magma and Aqua storyline, I take on Juan, the water type specialist. I start off with Ame against Love Disc and use Thunderbolt and a full heal for the Sweet Kiss. There's a close call with a flail, but another Thunderbolt finishes off the love disc. Next up is the Wishcash, so I swap Ame out for Charles to heal Ame. Wishcash uses an Earthquake to take out Charles, so I bring out D. Two Tri-Attacks does the trick. Next is Celio, who also goes down to 2 Tri-Attacks. Next was Kingdra, who freezes from a Tri-Attack. One more Tri-Attack and the Kingdra to Frost and lands an Ice Beam, taking down D. I bring out Alf, who evolved in the Flygon off screen. 2 Dragon Breaths and the Kingdra goes down. Finally is Juan's Crawdaunt, who goes down to 2 Dragon Breaths and a Crunch. With that, we beat the 8th gym leader and it's on to the Elite Four. But first it's the Roulette. I lost Ame to the Roulette. I would have liked to use the Thunderstone and have a Raichu, but not everything works out. Now it's on to the last major fight against Wally. It starts off with Altaria versus D. A few Tri-Attacks later and Wally switches Altaria for Magneton. I switch to Alf. It takes some time, but Alf wins. Wally brought back the Altaria, who got Crunch, then Dragon Breath. Next was Delcatty, who was quickly dealt with. Then it was the Gardevoir. One Calm Mind and a Psychic took down Alf. He then beat down Yaze, Charles, and Fang. I had D use Tri-Attack to take down the Gardevoir. Then use Fly against the Roselia. I won the battle and Charles evolved into Lantern. As for the last roulette, I lost the A's. I don't really know much about Girafarig, so no loss here. Before taking on the Elite Four, I decided to capture 2 more Pokemon for a full team. A Sableye named Cian, and the one and only Rayquaza, which is named Boba. Side note, this is actually my second attempt at the Elite Four, since I wiped the Glacier due to a critical on Boba. I thought a Blizzard would have missed, but it didn't. Now on to the actual Elite Four. We start off with Sydney, who focuses on Dark types. It starts off with Alf versus Mightyena. A quick Earthquake and critical Dragon Breath takes the Mightyena down. Next is Shiftry, so I switch to D. Shiftry uses Double Team and D's Fly misses. So I switch back to Alf and use Feint Attack, since Feint Attack can't miss. Next up is Cacturn. I switch to D and use Fly and it takes it down. Next is Absol, so D uses Tri-Attack, Sydney uses the Full Restore, and a few more Tri-Attacks finishes the Absol. Next is Crawdaunt. 2 Flies don't take it down, and so the Crawdaunt uses a Flail, which takes down D. I bring out Alf, who finishes the match with Strength. 1 down, 4 to go. Now we fight Phoebe, who specializes in Ghost types. It starts off with Cian versus Dusclops. Dusclops starts off with 2 Protects, a Confuse Ray, then Curse. So I switch to D, who used Fly to finish her off. Next is Bannet, which survives a Fly but goes down to a Drill Peck. Next is the second Dusclops, who finishes D off with a rock slide. I bring out Alf, who goes down to 2 ice beams. So I finally bring out Boba, who wins with Fly. Then it's her second Bandit. It gets one shot with Fly, and then it's her Sableye next. Boba misses with the Fly, so it uses Outrage next and finishes the match. So that's 2 down and 3 to go. Next up is Glacia and her ice types. It starts off with Alf versus Celio. Alf goes down to 2 ice balls. I bring out Charles, who survives an ice ball and throws a thunderbolt, taking down the first Celio. Now it's our Glalie next. I revive Alf, then bring out Boba. One overheat takes down the Glalie. Now it's her second Celio up to bat. So I switch to Fang, who lands the Sunspore, and it goes down to Blizzard. I bring out Dee, who also goes down to Blizzard. Her Tri-Tag was able to do some damage at least. I have Rayquaza use Outrage and Celia goes down. Glacia sends her second Glalie only for it to faint the next turn. Now it's her Walrein that's here. The Outrage almost takes it down, and it lands an Ice Beam. I heal with a full restore as Glacia does the same. Boba uses Outrage a few more times and the match is over. 3 down, 2 to go. Second to last is Drake, the Dragon-type user. The match starts off with Shelgon versus Alf. The first Dragon Breath almost takes the Shelgon down, but Drake heals, so Alf does it again. A few more times and the Shelgon goes down. So Drake brings his Flygon. I thought my Flygon would win, but no. The other Flygon was faster. I resort to the reliable Boba and use Outrage. It takes down the Flygon in its area. Next is the Salamence. As Boba got confused, I switch to Fang, who also goes down to the Dragon Claw. I switch back to Boba and use Outrage, which finally takes down the Salamence and the Kingdra. Now it's 4 down and 1 to go. Finally, it's time to take on Wallace, who focuses on water types. The match starts off with Wailord versus Charles. He gets the first Thunderbolt, but the second one doesn't work as Wishcash has a water ground typing. I switch to Alf, who is infected by Earthquake. Wishcash Surf does more than half damage though. Another Surf takes down Alf. I have Boba use Fly and takes the Wishcash down. The Warlord comes back and survives an extreme speed. Wallace heals, so I have Boba use Fly. The second Fly does the trick. The next one is Tentacruel, who survives an Outrage, who then lands an Ice Beam, but faints to a second Outrage. Halfway there, and now it's Milotic. I switch to Charles, who survives an Ice Beam. I heal Boba as Milotic uses Toxic. Another attack finally takes down Charles. I switch back to Boba. A critical Outrage takes Milotic down. Next is Gyarados, who survives the Outrage. He sets up 3 Dragon Dances, but a critical Outrage stops before I can get swept. Finally, it's Ludicolo's time to fight. I switch to D, who lands an up Drillpex. With Wallace defeated, we officially defeated the Elite Four. Now it's on to some reflection. I think the carry for the Elite run was Boba, followed by Alpha and D. So after looking back at run 1, I wiped a total of 7 times. I decided to give this roulette challenge another shot. For an added challenge, I decided that for each wipe, I would have to do roulette as a penalty. Furthermore, I won't be allowed to use the previous Pokemon of my last run.
Now let's begin run 2. Since we picked Monty last time, this time we'll go with Torchic and name him Bernie. We beat May's Mudkip and go find a replacement like last time. You find a Seedot and name her Dora. That did not feel like an equal exchange. I catch a Zigzagoon and name him Zargon. We deal with Wally and go to Petalburg Woods. I catch a Nincada, name her Nano, a Slackoth, naming him Gao, and finally a Shroomish, naming her Ree. Dora evolves into Nuzleaf. Time for the second major fight. It starts off with Ree versus Geodude. The match goes relatively quick. The Ree's healing with Absorb, along with the damage not being too severe, makes this really fast. The two Geodudes are dealt with and the Nose Pass goes down too. With that fight done, it's onto the Roulette. The one taken was Dora. Losing the first placement was something the first run will never experience. More story happens, and this time we fight May at Rustboro City. I was quite surprised when she pulled a Torkoal, but Zargon handled it with a crit. He took care of the Mudkip, so the fight went smoothly. With the second rival fight done, we roulette. I lost Ree to the roulette. I'm not too thrilled, but I continue on. I decided to catch an Abra named Shazo. Then I catch a Makuhita named Melvin. Shazo evolves into Kadabra and learned Confusion. For the second gym battle, we have Shazo against the fighting types. The match starts with Shazo against Machop. One Confusion takes the Machop down. Next is Meditate, who goes down after 2 Confusions. Finally, it's Makushita. He survives the first Confusion and lands a Vital Throw. The second Confusion finishes the match. Now it's roulette time. Into the roulette. He was useful for grinding. Nothing else to say. I catch a Minun and name her Stella. Zargon evolves into Lanoon. Now it's time to fight May again. The match starts with Zargon versus Lombre. Zargon's headbutt does a good deal of damage. The second headbutt finishes off the Lombre. Next is Marshtomp. Zargon sets up with a few sand attacks and proceeds to headbutt the Marshtomp. Marshtomp lands a few hits, but the Zargon wins. Finally, it's the Slugma. Zargon finishes the fight with headbutt, and it's to the roulette re-go. Shazo was next to go. He was taken too early from this run. He would have defeated so many strong Pokemon. We move on. I catch a Gulpin and name him Greg. Nano evolves into Ninjask, and we also get a Shedinja as a nice bonus. Next is Wally, whose Ralts gets beaten with one headbutt. To the roulette, and I lose Gao to the roulette. We had a good portion of Pokemon I don't use, so I can't tell if anything was really lost or not. Next major fight is Watson. The match starts off with Greg versus Voltorb. Greg uses Sludge, and Voltorb gets a critical spark. So I heal when he sparks again, but not another critical. Greg uses Amnesia and gets sparked. I heal again, Greg gets sparked and paralyzed, but is able to use Amnesia to increase his special defense again. I don't know why I kept on healing Greg. This Voltorb uses Self-Destruct, but Greg still stands. Electrike is next, and howls, so Greg yawns. While Electrike is asleep, Greg uses Sludge, and Watson heals as Electrike is close to fainting. A few more Sludges takes the Electrike down. Now it's Magneton, so I switched to Shedinja. Thanks to Wonder Guard, the only thing that can take it down is if it hurts itself after a Supersonic. To save time for the viewers, I switched to Stella and used Thunder Wave, then back to Shedinja and have it use Flash a few times. Then back to Stella to chip in more damage. I switched to Greg, then back to Stella for some reason. Eventually, Stella takes it down. Netric howls and takes Stella down. I switch to Shedinja and use Flash several times. I switch to Shedinja and use Flash several times and scratch until the Netric faints. A very unentertaining fight. As for the Roulette, I lost Shedinja. I'm fairly certain it would have been great against Norman. Next, at Pebblebrook City, I catch a Goldie, name him Gordon, and I catch a Machop named Winston, and a Copy named Sonia. Greg evolves to Swalot. Next major fight is against Maxie at Vampire. It starts with Stella against Mighty Anna. 2 sparks and she lands a paralysis. Maxie heals and she keeps up the sparks. Stella gets low, so I switch to Sonia. Two sludges take him down. Next is Zubat, and his wing attack takes a good chunk of damage. Luckily, Sonia lands a critical sludge and takes him down. Next is Gamerupt, so I have Sonia use self-destruct and the match is finished. Now it's Roulette time. Next to go is Zargon. You will be missed for your contributions. Time to fight Flannery. First is Numble vs Sonia. Sonia gets a critical sludge and poisons the Numble. Numble sets up a sunny day, Sonia lands another sludge, and Numble goes down, but not before using Overheat and taking Sonia down too. I send Greg out. Numble faints to the poison and Slugma out to fight. Body Slam does a bit of damage, but so does Slugma's Overheat, which also happens to be a critical as well, so Greg faints. I send Gordon out and revive Greg. Also do the same to Sonia. Gordon gets smogged and poisoned. A Horn Attack almost takes the Slugma down, but Flannery heals. Gordon lands a Supersonic and I give him an antidote. A few more Horn Attacks and the Slugma goes down. Now it's Gamerupt. Gordon misses a Supersonic and goes down to a tackle. I send Sonia out to poison the Gamerupt. She goes down to an Overheat. Why did I send Stella out? I do revive Sonia again though. Stella does use Growl a few times in a row and goes down to an Overheat. I send Sonia out again and Gamerupt goes down to the poison. Finally, it's Torkoal. Overheat takes Sonia down again and is back to Greg. I revive Sonia and heal Greg from the Torkoal's Body Slam. Torkoal uses Attract. Greg lands the Yawn. For some reason, I didn't switch to Sonia and have her use Self-Destruct. Instead, I poisoned the Torkoal and waited things out. Not an entertaining fight. With that over, it's on to the Roulette. I lose Greg. There goes another fairly good Pokemon. Later, I catch a Sandshrew and name him Ross. Now, we face Norman. His Spinda gets a Teeter Dance off Melvin. One Revenge and Spinda goes down. Melvin takes Vigoroth down and it's on to Linoon. Linoon lands a Belly Drum and Melvin hits himself in confusion. The rest is history. Now to Roulette as penalty for losing. I lost Sonia. As for round 2, everything goes the same except the Lightning section. Instead of Belly Drum, he uses Facade at full health. Melvin snaps out of confusion and uses Revenge and takes the Lightning down. All that's left is Slacking. Slacking Facade takes down Melvin. Next to fight is Ross, who uses Sand Attack 6 times. Slacking then uses Fan Attack. A move that doesn't miss. I revive Winston and Ross shortly goes down. 2 Revenge later, and the match is over. Now to Roulette. Next to go is Ross. Moving on. Close to Meteor Falls, I catch Lotad and name him Luge. I thought it was Louise, but no. Also, I catch a Swablu named Monica, and a Magnemite named Corona. While training, Corona evolves into Magneton.
I finish the Aqua Laboratory section. Then I fight May again. It starts off with Gordon versus Lombre. I switch to Stella, who gets hit by a fake out. Now it's Spark versus Nature Power, and Stella wins. Next is Marshtomp, so Stella uses Charm, then goes down to a Mud Shot. Winston takes over, and 2 revenges later, the Marshtomp goes down. Finally, it's Slugma, so I switch to Gordon, who finishes the match with Surf. Now we Roulette. I lose Gordon. Nothing really comes to mind for this one. I catch Kecleon, naming him Leon. Time to face Winoria. It starts off with Corona versus Swablu. A Spark takes the Swablu. Now it's Altaria next, who in return uses Earthquake and takes Corona down. I bring out Stella to Thunder Wave the Altaria. Stella goes down, so I bring Leon, I revive Stella, and switch to her. Altaria uses more Dragon Dances as Stella charms. She goes down to another Earthquake. I bring up Monica and heal Stella. Monica takes a few aerial aces, then goes down. Now it's Stella for the 3rd time. A few charms later, and a Spark happens, Altaria sets up more Dragon Dances and Stella charms. Eventually, Winoria heals and I revive Corona. Stella the Altaria will Sonic Boom. Next is a Skarmory, who goes down to a critical Spark. Next is Tropius. Several Sparks, and turns later she goes down too. Finally it's Pelipper. Thankfully it goes down after a Spark. Now to Roulette. The one gone this time is Winston. I'm glad I had Winston throughout the Norman fight. Luge evolves into Lombre. I believe Monica evolved off screen, and now we invade the Magma Hideout. Now we fight Maxie again. First it's Mighty Anna versus Monica. Several Dragon Breaths and Fly take it down. Next is Camerupt, and Monica lands a Scene, so I switch to Luge and use a Surf to take the Camerupt down. Next is Crobat, who takes Luge down, so I bring Stella. She gets confused and lands a Thunder Wave and a few Sparks. I heal just in case. A few more Sparks later, and the fight is over. On to the Roulette. Luge was taken next. His contributions during the Magma Hideout section will not be forgotten. Next is the final rival fight against May. It starts off with Tropius versus Monica. She lands a critical Dragon Breath which paralyzes the Tropius, then finishes her off with Fly. Next is Slugma, and 2 Dragon Breaths make quick work of her. Finally is Ludicolo, who survives a Fly but goes down to the Dragon Breath. Finally is the Marshtomp that's left. It takes a few, but she goes down too. It was a peaceful and easygoing fight. As for the Roulette, it was Leon's time to go. This part of the run was interesting because I had no other water types to use, and I couldn't use any previous Pokemon as well, so I thought I had Soft Lock myself. I thought I could go to the Safari Zone, catch a Psyduck, but Psyducks are only available if you're using Surf. Until I remembered that I could use a good Rod to catch a Kavana. Sadly, this epiphany was off screen. Kavana was named Galdo, so then I went to the Safari and caught a Psyduck named Aster. Now it's time to fight Liz&Tate. First, it's Natu and Claydol versus Galdo and Stella. Galdo's Crunch takes the Natu down in 1 hit. Claydol's Earthquake takes down Stella and half of Galdo's health. I bring out Nano and heal Galdo. Galdo uses Crunch on the Claydol, taking a bit more than half health. I have Nano slash the Soul Rock and Galdo finish off the Claydol. Galdo feints the Solar Beam. I revive Galdo and Monica stuns the Soul Rock with Dragon Breath. Soul Rock uses Sunny Day and Lunatone uses Calm Mind. Nano feints to a Psychic by Lunatone and Galdo's back. Galdo uses Surf, but given Sunny Day, its power is weakened. Lunatone Calm Minds once more, and Soul Rock misses a Psychic on Monica. Galdo's Critical Crunch takes Soul Rock down. Lunatone uses Light Screen, and Galdo and Monica eventually take the Lunatone down. Before we handle the next double battle against Maxie, we Roulette. This time I lost Nano. I feel incredibly neutral about this one. As for the doubles battle, I choose Galdo, Chrono, and Stella. Galdo's serve takes camera up down and almost the Mighty Anna too. Now it's 2 Mighty Anna to face. Another serve takes a stronger Mighty Anna down. Now it's a Crobat. Galdo uses Crunch on Mighty Anna. It almost goes down. But then the Mighty Anna uses Takedown on Galdo, so it also goes down as well. Next is the Golbat. Another serve does a bit of damage to both of them. Matang finally doesn't hit itself and uses Psychic on the Golbat. One wing attack finally takes down Galdo, so I bring out Krona, but Matang's Metal Claw finishes off the Crobat. Finally, it's Camerupt that we fight. The Camerupt's Earthquake takes down both Krona and Matang. I bring back Galdo and his Surf finishes the match. After dealing with Maxie's internal crisis, it's to the Roulette. This time it's Krona's time to go. With only a handful of major fights to go, I move on. I catch an Absol named Karen and a Tropius named Ragster. I fight Archie for the last time for this video. It starts off with Galdo versus Mighty Anna. Galdo's Surf almost takes the Mighty Anna down, but it barely survives, but thanks to the second crunch. Next is the Crobat, so I switch to Monica and she stuns the Crobat with Dragon Breath. It's close, but Monica beats the Crobat. Finally, it's Archie's Sharpedo. Sharpedo takes out Monica, so Stella finishes the fight. Aster evolves into Golduck. This time, Monica is taken by the Roulette. That one definitely hurt. A valuable team member is gone. On to the second last major fight. It's against Juan. It starts off with Love Disc versus Stella. A Thunder Wave and Spark almost takes her down. He heals the Love Disc, but since Stella does Spark again, he withdraws it for Wish Cash. Given its Water Ground typing, Spark does nothing. I switch to Ragster and Magical Leaf almost takes it down. A second Magical Leaf takes it down, next is Celio. Another Magical Leaf almost takes half health. The Celio's Aurora Beam almost takes the Ragster out. I switch to Aster, who survives the Aurora Beam really well. I heal the Ragster and Aster goes down to a Body Slam. I bring out Stella and her Spark does the trick. The Love Disc comes back with a Quick Attack and that takes her down too. Next up is Crawdon. A Thunder Wave and Spark takes him down. Finally, it's time to take on the Kingdra. Stella Thunder Waves the Kingdra and goes down to a Water Pulse. I send out Ragster, who goes down to a super effective Ice Beam. Next up is Galdo, who gets confused by the Water Pulse. Eventually the crunches start landing, and the Kingdra is defeated. With the 8th Gym Leader down, it's on to another Roulette. This time I lose Ragster. It was nice being able to fly while I could. This happened off screen, but I went to the safari and captured a pincer named Jimmy and a Rhyhorn named Grayson. On screen, I went to the Meteor Falls to catch a Bagong named Kiryu. I battled Wally for the final time. The match starts with Stella vs Altaria. Stella starts a Thunder Wave, then a Charmus. Altaria sets up a Dragon Dance. A few more Sparks finally takes Altaria down. Next is Delcatty, who charms Stella. The Delcatty barely survives the Sparks, then sings. I use a Heal Powder as Wally uses a full restore. A few more Sparks and a Quick Attack finishes the Delcatty off. Next up is the Magneton, so I have Stella use Thunder Wave. Stella uses 2 more charms, then I switch to Jimmy. He goes down before being able to attack. Next is Grayson, so I switch back to Stella and have her finish the Magneton. Next is Roselia, so I Thunder Wave as usual, then she gets Toxic, so I used a full restore. Stella gets Toxic again, so I switch to Karen. Karen gets Leech Seeded and takes Roselia down with Strength. Finally, it's the Gardevoir, so I have Karen use Perish Song. 3 turns pass and the match is finished. On to the last roulette. As for the final roulette, I lost Stella. She was valuable to the team and would have been a great Pokemon to use against Wallace. The team's all level 50 and I gave them some TMs. Now it's time to beat the Elite Four one last time. It starts off with Sydney, and we use Jimmy against the Mighty Anna. A Brick Break almost beats the Mighty Anna, and he uses Sand Attack in return. While Sydney heals, I had Jimmy use Sword Attack, and then Brick Break again. The Mighty Anna goes down. This process repeats against the Absol, Shiftry, Cacturn, and Crawdon as well. 1 down, 4 to go. Now it's Phoebe's turn. It's Absol against Dusclops. 2 bites take it down, 2 more bites take the Bandit down, but she lands a critical Shadow Ball before fainting. Now it's the Sableye. 2 bites almost take it down, but Phoebe heals, so Karen uses Thunderbolt, then gets a critical bite, taking Sableye. Next is the second Bandit, which faints after the bite. Finally, it's the Dusclops, who survives a Thunderbolt and bite. Karen goes down to 2 Ice Beams. Galdo's Crunch finishes the match. 2 down, 3 to go. Now it's Glacier's turn. It's Karen vs Celio. Karen uses a Thunderbolt that does about half damage, and the second Thunderbolt takes the first Celio down. Next is Glalie, who survives the Thunderbolt, then uses Ice Beam. Eventually, Karen goes down, so next up is Galdo. Galdo dodges the attack, then uses 2 crunches to take the Glalie down. Next is another Celio, so Galdo uses Crunch and lowers the Celio's special defense. 1 more Crunch does the trick. Next up is Glalie. The first Crunch does some damage and lowers the special defense, and the second Crunch finishes the Glalie off. The same thing happens, but with Walrein. 3 down, 2 to go. Next is Drake. Starting with Galdo against Shelgong. Galdo uses Ice Beam, and that defeats the Shelgong, as well as the Altaria. The Kingdra puts up a good fight, but the second Crunch takes it down. Next is Flygon, who uses Earthquake to take Galdo down. I bring up Kiryu, who uses some Dragon Claws, and eventually that takes the Flygon down. Finally, it's a Salamence versus Kiryu. Kiryu lands a good Dragon Claw, but the other Salamence hangs on and finishes Kiryu off. I have Karen finish the fight with strength. 4 down, 1 to go. Finally, it's Wallace's turn to fight. The match starts with Karen versus Wailord. 2 Thunderbolts take it down. Next is Tentacruel, who handles the Thunderbolts and dishes out a Sludge and a Hydro Pump to defeat Karen. Next, I send out Galdo. The Tentacruel survived Galdo's Crunch and Wallace heals it. It's a close match, but Galdo beats the Tentacruel with a Crunch. Next is Ludicolo, who Giga Drains Galdo. I send out Kiryu, whose Fly takes the Ludicolo down. Next is Milotic, who uses Ice Beam and takes Kiryu down. I send out Aster to Toxic Stall the Milotic. Halfway through, I switch to Jimmy. An Earthquake almost takes the Milotic down. Eventually, the Toxic takes the Milotic down. Next is Wishcash, who almost takes Jimmy down, but I switch to Aster to Toxic. I heal up the team and Wishcash faints to the Toxic. Finally, it's the Gyarados that stands in our way. We also Toxic Stall the Gyarados, who sets up a few Dragon Dances. Wallace heals with a full restore and Aster goes down to a Hyper Beam. I really didn't want to, but I revived Kiryu and Karen. Surf takes Grayson down. Karen tries to Parrot Song, but gets Hyper Beamed. I revived Karen and Aster, thinking this will be another Toxic Stall once someone gets Hyper Beamed. Jimmy, then Aster go down. Turns out I just needed to bring out Kiryu and keep using Dragon Claw and Headbutts. With that, the Elite Four have been defeated. Ending thoughts. I wish I had footage of the number generator to give you a better idea about how it looks. Grinding near the end was exhausting but very worth it, along with collecting the TMs. It sucked how a Pokemon could be lost after lots of grinding, but that's how it would be sometimes. The ones that hurt the most for the first run would be Riz, Cora, Singe, Leona, and Ame. The ones that hurt the most during the second run would be Shazo, Zargon, Monica, and Stella. If I were to do a third run, I'd add no legendaries and no pseudo-legendaries, no healing items during battle, no over-leveling, and no going over the limit and tossing them into the box like I did with Pumpkin for run 1. For certain major fights, I wouldn't allow certain types, like no grass types for Roxanne, or another example would be like no psychics against Brawly. As to how to decide, I suppose using a random number generator since that's completely random. Maybe I'd add more major fights like the admins or the first Aqua Grunt. I'd probably try to do a possible revival clause. So say for example I have 6 Pokemon and I wanted to revive 1. I would revive it, but I have to put 2 Pokemon into the box at random as a result. Maybe Roulette a Pokemon after every 2 fights with the Elite Four. So after Phoebe, Roulette 1, and then after Drake, Roulette another. Or maybe fight the entire gym without healing, like how you fight the Elite Four in one go. Well, what's the purpose of the Pokemon Roulette Challenge? There is no purpose. Just my attempt at playing Pokemon differently, and I thought to share it. Hope you enjoyed, and that's all.